Oh yeah, okay.
Hey Chris, good to see you. Thanks for making a bit of time to come and have a chat. I know you're busy because you're training for this event that you're doing in the near future. So thank you for giving us a bit of time. I wanted to kick off by asking you about something that you mentioned last time we spoke. You said most people don't know why they're building a business, which is a brave statement because I'm sure a lot of people would disagree with it. What did you mean exactly, and what are you trying to get at there?
Well, yeah, yeah, when you put it cold like that, it does sound like a brave statement, and there's an obvious answer to it, isn't there? Which is, well, I'm doing it for money. But there's a whole load of nuance. I think there's a lot of depth underneath that. Why do people start businesses, and why do they continue to run them? Especially because it's a pretty high risk thing for many people. So why do people do that? And I think there's lots of reasons why people start. It could be things like they have an opportunity, they spot an opportunity, or they have a bit of a windfall, and they've always wanted to do something like that. It could be simply that they're trying to get away from something else.
Yeah.
Often, people leave bosses and and then can't get a job or don't want another job and so on. But I think the sort of the core essence of reasons why people start in the first place is some degree of autonomy. I know it's quite cliche to say they do it for financial freedom and so on, but I think for most people to start with, they may have a dream like that, but that's not why they start. That's more like a hope of what will happen in the end. But they often start to have like, I want to be master of my own destiny. I want to be in control of me, and that would include money to a great extent. But I think that's why lots of people will start businesses, and the ones that I mainly work with are ones who have then they're past the startup phase. So that's a really tough phase, as we all know.
Yep.
There's a whole load of problems and challenges to solve, but once you get past that, and the business starts to become more stable. You know how to get clients. You know what you're doing. You know how to deliver it. You should know how to make a profit at what you're doing, and then it becomes quite stable. And it's really at that point I call that the operating middle, because it's like after the startup, but it's before scale up. And a lot of people think that's the inevitable or desirable next stage. But I don't. But I can explain that. But this thing in the middle, called I call it the operating middle. That's where business really then becomes more like the job they probably had in the past, or it's just like the steady state. And it's in that moment where I think the question that my bold statement, as you put it, is very relevant. They don't know why they run their business, because it's sort of, this is where I've got to. I happen to find myself here
Yeah.
in this stage, and then there's where does it go? And so it's more like a sort of a steady state, and that's where I think people then it is just like a job. It can be a chore. Of course, it can be very very motivating, successful, have all the good stuff. But a lot of the time, there's a lot of the weight that brings with it, and they kind of forget why, or they never really connected with why do I do this? Do I do this crazy thing like run my own business?
I mean, I think it's interesting you describe it that way because I think you've kind of hit up on an interesting kind of conundrum, really. I mean, I think people get confused. I mean, this is slightly off what you're talking about. I think people get confused between, if you like, goals and objectives
Mhm.
or purpose and objectives. So if I'm playing squash, my
Yep.
my goal is to win,
Yep.
but my purpose is to enjoy playing squash with me mate.
Nice. Nice.
And they're sort of they can get confused, and that
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
happens a lot in business, doesn't it?
That's a really good analogy. Because in the business, in the scale of business I'm talking about, that I think what you described there absolutely play mirrors that, where the goal, where your squash goal is to win the match, win the game. That's to win a client. It's to make enough money this month or whatever. It's there's a financial, there's a very sort of here and now moment. But underlying that, like you say, there's your purpose is to enjoy the game, and maybe is to stay fit or whatever. There's all sorts of other ways of interpreting that or thinking about it, and it's that underlying bit that we're talking about. Like, I've got to, my objective is to win X revenue this month or whatever. But yeah, the purpose. What's the question? What's the question? And I've got my answer to that, and it was really born out of experience, because it was the about. So I started independent. I left the corporate world in 2004. So now it was about 22 years ago. And about where were we? About 7 or 8 years into that, where business, as I called it at that time, was going very nicely. Thank you very much. But I then became a widowed dad, so I lost my wife, and and that's where everything changed because until that point we'd been a sort of a classic, I suppose you could call it, the nuclear family, two parents, two kids kind of thing, and played our normal traditional roles, if you like, where I could go out and do the business stuff and bring the money in, be the provider, and mum would stay at home and or it worked as well, but she'd be at home with the kids. And then that situation changed, and it was that gave me the opportunity, say the opportunity, but it forced on me really to realize or to work out what was most important. And so the way that I was running the business before that was not a way that would be tenable for the way after that. And it made me realize that all the things that I thought was important to me before, my purpose perhaps
Yeah,
for running a
yeah.
business, were things like status and wealth. And I think a lot of it's wrapped up in status and ego, actually, to feel like you're doing something useful and worthwhile and, you're respected and all those things. And actually, when it really boils down to it, what really matters, at least for me, and I know it's true for a lot of people, is love and family. And it's very, very personal. It's not about the business. I used to tell this story about, imagine going to a funeral of Bob and someone gives the eulogy and said, here lies Bob. And, Bob doubled the size of his business. You think, well, good for Bob.
Yeah,
Is that a life well lived?
yeah.
Because it really got quite profound at that time.
So let me ask you then, because I mean, the impact of that has changed what you do with clients as well, hasn't it? I mean, because when we first met, you were building what was essentially a franchise business.
Yeah, that's right.
And now you've completely changed direction I think, as a result of what happened. But you do a completely different thing for clients now. I mean, just tell us what you're trying to do in a bit more detail for clients, because I mean, we had a very interesting conversation about that when we last spoke. I mean, just tell us.
Mm. Yeah, and it's interesting to hear you describe it that way because to me it doesn't feel different at all. Well, what I do doesn't feel different at all. Ultimately, I'm working with a number of different businesses in different capacities, whether that's as an investor or an advisor, a guide, coach, mentor, whatever the label, whatever fits. But I'm basically helping them make their business better. But what I have now is a much clearer vision for me, and that most of those also buy into for their version of the same thing, which is to create something personally for them. It's not anymore, which it was before, but it's no longer a game of uh, chasing more. What I realized there's no ultimate fulfillment in forever chasing more. Um, and the the what I feel slightly uncomfortable about, I haven't quite found the right description for it yet, is that if you're not always going for more, then there must be a level that is, quote, enough. And enough sounds to me how it's usually used sounds like a compromise. It's like you're settling in some way. And I profoundly just don't, that's not my interpretation of the word enough. But there's to have what you want. And what you want is unlimited in principle. It's not, there's no implication or suggestion that you need to compromise or settle or anything like that. But just decide what you want. And so the way that I then work with these businesses is to say, well, that's the real objective.
Mm.
The objective is not to have a bigger business, full stop. It's to have a life that you really want to have, and that the business becomes a vehicle to fund that without sucking the marrow out of you while you do it. So the business, it becomes and I've developed a methodology around that. But you basically it's a way of thinking about the business, seeing it, designing it, and thinking about the business, and then operating and running it, such that it creates what I call, and sort of the breakthrough concept for me was the idea of a financial moat, a personal financial moat. So we all have a lifestyle that we, desire, whether it's conscious or unconscious, and that lifestyle costs a certain amount. I mean, there are four or five kind of big financial lumps that are required for that, like normal living expenses, that just, whatever it costs. The other two main big financial outlays for most people would be housing and all the costs of accommodation and everything around that, and car transport, whatever. Those are the two main big personal lumps out of that, beyond children and everything else. And then you've got the other sort of typical big expense would be, what kind of holidays do you want? People spend a lot, a relative large amount of their own resources on that, and then everything else that you want, where children and everything else could come into that. So across those kind of five big buckets, if you can get an idea of what actually every year I'd like to be, I want a life that costs this much. Now you know what that number is. And for argument's sake, and there's no right answer, there's only your number. So for some it might be 30 or 40 grand a year, for some it might be 300 or 400, and some 10 times that. It depends. It's a very personal decision. But when you got your number, so for the point of this discussion, let's just call it 100 grand in a year. And that 100 grand is not just whoop-de-doo. That means I get, this is a brilliant life. This pays for the life I'm choosing.
Yeah.
So the question then is, how do I get that 100 grand? And you can spend 30, 40 years working and earning that, every year, or you can accelerate and get to a point where you've got an investment pot. And that's what I call the financial moat. So when you've got that financial moat in place, so that it pays out the interest or the return you get on that investment every year pays for the 100 grand. Well, now you're sorted, right? I know there's more complexity than that, but conceptually that it's a very simple idea. So how big does that pot need to be? And that depends on what's your risk appetite, how ballsy are you or not, And so if you think, well, actually, I'm going to get a personal pot, and I reckon I'm going to invest that and get 20% a year, which would be very aggressive for many people. Well, in that case, you only need 500,000 as an investment pot to pay out 20% at 100, gives you 100 grand a year. Conversely, you might say, well, that's ridiculous. I'm going to have it much safer in it so that it can pay out 5% and I can rely on that. Well, now you need 2 million. 2 million at 5% is 100 grand a year. So now you've got 2 million. Now, with that number in mind, that 2 million, for example, it's not 2 million that's just, plucked out of the air.
Yeah.
It's come from a real sense of, actually, what do I really want? And the logic flows through there and says, oh, there you go. There's a number that would give me, if I had that, and if it paid out 5% a year, I would not need to have my business anymore. Now, I'm not at all advocating you then stop, because this comes back to, why do we have our business? It's for other reasons than money, all sorts of other reasons. But now you take the money pressure away, and that when you say what I'm doing now is quite different from previously, when I was, yes, indeed, building a franchise. And in those days, that was all about, how do we get more? How do we build it? It was sort of mini empire, if you like. And this took it in a very different direction, which is much calmer, much simpler way of dealing with things.
I think that's also impacted on the way you live your life, isn't it? I mean, just tell us about how your life has changed as a result of the way that thinking's changed.
Excuse me a second. Well, yeah, I think before, if I reflect back to when my role in the family was just provider and and all of that, that was about, my lifestyle was very much around work. It was a big part of my identity. And again, as I say that out loud, I recognize that's actually, I think a lot of people that I speak to in business recognize their identity is wrapped up. So their business is very much, excuse me.
Yeah.
Over to you a second.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely right. I come across that a lot. I mean, people's whole identity is wrapped up in their business, especially with
and therefore it's really, it feels really personal.
Yeah.
And there's all that sort of stress that goes around it. If the business fails, I fail, etc. Or if the business is under stress, I'm under stress. And it's just unnecessary. But yes, so what I was able to do and advocate now is just move to a very different philosophy that, as I say, it's not about compromise. You can have as a life full of largesse if that's what you want. It's not what I want. So I I value time, peace, calm, and so we have the Americans would call it an RV. We have got it's a camper van
Yeah,
motorhome type thing.
yeah, I got one
Um,
of them. I get that.
yeah,
Yeah,
and it's funny how people say, "Oh, living the dream," right? Everyone, lots of people really like that. It's not flashy, right? It's not, this is, but I quite like the stealth part idea around that. But yeah, this is about not trying to impress anybody else.
Mm.
It is all about really figuring out what do you really want. I remember saying that out loud reminds me there was, people spend loads of time and energy and money they haven't got, or spending money they haven't got, trying to buy things they don't really want to impress people they don't even like. This is
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good way of summarizing it, actually. Yeah. And in terms of how you work with clients
yeah,
around, I mean, presumably you're talking to people that have got fairly well established business.
absolutely, yeah, yeah,
And I mean, the thing that interests me about that is that what you're talking about is, I mean, the mathematics of it, as it were, are fairly straightforward,
yeah,
actually.
yeah,
It's the mental shift, the kind of
yeah,
shift
yeah.
philosophy that is interesting. I mean, how do you, I mean, do clients come to you and say, I want to change my philosophy, or do you help them change? I mean, how does that piece work, the mental piece? Because
The triggers.
the
So no,
math
no,
is,
no one comes and saying, "Hey, I want to change my mental philosophy." That, and nor do people come saying, "I want to build a financial moat," because those are they're quite novel ideas. They're quite
yeah,
perhaps at some level sophisticated ideas. They're removed. The point is
yeah,
they're removed from the day-to-day experience, and most people's triggers and needs and wants are in the day-to-day experience. So the thing that I mean, I post stuff on LinkedIn, and that's my sort of main sort of social platform, if you like. And I email folks, who are on my email list. But the main trigger, if you like, is the realization that I'm not sure where I'm going anymore. As I say, the people that I work with, they're not startups. In that situation, that's very different. People are very clear. They're
yeah,
not necessarily clear what the answers are, but they know what the problems are. In the operating middle, it's like, how much longer am I going to go on with this? Do I really, it's this. There's no immediate crisis. There's this just sense of I'm just, at least in some, I'm just kind of fed up with this.
yeah,
And it's not just a sort of a general malaise. It's also born out of some sense of frustration, because it's like, they've come through, as I say, they've come through the tricky bit. They've done the hard bit. Now they've got here, so they just need more clients, and they just need to more sales, and to create more profit and so on. So all of those things mean more, right? I need to add more clients, add more, and they've tried different ways and of getting more clients, but they hit their natural ceiling,
mm,
and uh, they get to a stage where they think, well, actually, to get more revenue, I need more clients. They think, but to have more clients, I need to be able to have more capacity to deliver what we do to our
yeah,
for our clients, because I'm focused on service business. So they think we've got to hire more people, but hiring then hits a financial risk buffer,
mm,
because the pipeline isn't necessarily very stable or very predictable.
mm,
So I might hire someone. I've got the cash today to hire someone, but if the pipeline dries up, am I going to have the cash tomorrow for someone? And it feels like a risk. And they get into this sort of closed loop where I want to expand, so I need to invest, but I daren't invest because it might go wrong, and they just stay in this loop. So and scaling, classic scaling, lives on the other side of that loop. It says, right, you can do more, you have to invest, and but systemize things, get yourself out of it, and all of that kind of stuff, which for many people is a really good approach. Absolutely, there's nothing. That's not my approach, but I don't want to in any way criticize it, because it works. It's a very functional approach, very very successful approach, but it fits certain people and it does not fit others. There are
mm,
other people who have perfectly good businesses, actually, who really don't. They're not wired up. They've got no motivation or no desire to learn the skill that's required to scale. They don't want that, but
mm.
they want more than they've got here. So that's what I offer. I call it multipliable. It's not scaling. I think of scaling as it's a way of enabling the owner, the founder, whoever, to handle more, to have the capability and the skill set to cope with more. So we systemize stuff. We build an organization structure, all the sort of classic things that are needed in order to, they're not just good ideas, they're needed to scale a business. But if you don't want to scale in that way, but you want more revenue and more profit and more cash ultimately, without taking all of that scaling approach, that's where multipliable comes in. And this is where, if scaling is about being able to handle more at scale, multipliable is a way of getting more for the same input. It's getting more output from everything that you're already doing. In simple terms, there's nuance and there's a lot more to it. But in essence, it's about how can we really leverage, how can we really multiply the effect of what you're already doing.
That
And
sounds
this,
that sounds like, I mean, what you're describing.
yeah.
I've got a background as an economist. I mean, it sounds like productivity you're talking about.
Um, I mean, if you define productivity, if you measure productivity as output per input, so your revenue per hour, profit per hour, etc., absolutely, it is a measure of getting more, being more productive. But there are many opportunities that people are not looking at, not really using, in order to do that. So, for example, you might have, um, let's just say, let's use a generic term like a marketing agency. So they're delivering marketing services, and they will have their offer that is, let's say, I don't know, 5 grand, 10 grand a month, or whatever it is to their business clients, and that's maybe 80% of what they do, and other bits are of sort of ad hoc one-off projects or whatever. So that's their model, right? But they could have a they can multiply that in a number of different ways. One, and I'm just using these as demonstrators, examples to sort of illustrate
Yeah.
the idea. So one of those ways would be to reduce the scope of the work they do. Or there's a few more different ways. They could reduce the scope of the work they do, still produce a lot of value for the client, and therefore still charge the same, even though if you compare it with what the alternative they've been doing, they're apparently delivering less. They're not necessarily delivering less, but they're doing it with a tighter scope. So they can have less input for the same output, or indeed
Yeah.
more output. That's one type of idea. A classic way for many service businesses is they quote for projects, quote for jobs, and the basis of that quote will be their internal estimate of how long they think it'll take to do. In
Yeah.
other words, how much effort is involved.
Mm.
And um, I know it's a classic sort of business story about a factory that's working, and one of the machines in the production line goes down, and so they have to put an emergency call out to a mechanic who takes the call. He says, "Yeah, I'm available. I'm around the corner," and he turns up, and he comes up to the machine, and he knocks on it with a hammer a couple of times, and then he hits it where it should, and it starts working, and the factory starts working again. And then the story goes, he sends in the invoice and says, 500 quid. And the FD phones him. He says, "This is outrageous. You were on site for all of
I've
10
heard this
minutes.
story. Yeah, yeah.
Right." And he said, "No, no, you're sorry, you're completely right. I'll send you a new invoice." And he says, "Time on site, 20 quid, years of experience and knowledge, so I can fix it really quickly, 480 quid. It's the same total, right?" And everyone goes, "Yeah, good for you, absolutely." And there's that the sort of cliche response that says, "Yeah, you should be paid for the years, not for the minutes," and it all feels good. But where I take the story further is to say that there's a massive missed opportunity there,
Mm.
because that factory is producing every hour, and let's say it is producing, say, 20 grand of value every hour. And that was down for that period of time. Could have been down for 2 or 3 hours if that mechanic had not been able to fix it as quickly as he did. So he could have sent in an invoice that says potential lost value, lost revenue, 40 grand, 60 grand, whatever. Cost for fixing it, 2 grand. Not 500 quid that he that we all felt very pleased with.
Mm.
And it's just another way of so value versus time. These are all different ways of multiplying. This is where yeah, it is productivity, but it's there's lots of ways, and it's just left there. It's people are it's already available if only you could
Yeah, it's just a different way of
see it.
thinking about the same
Yeah,
problem. And how do clients respond to that? I mean, I'm just curious because it's a very interesting idea. I mean, the idea of value-based pricing. I mean, I'm
sure.
very familiar with that.
Yeah,
I mean, how do clients respond to that?
it's there's nearly always a similar journey in my experience. So there's the initial, yes, that's very true, and then almost immediately, yeah, but they won't buy it. So there's a fear
Yeah,
of saying, right, or I can't in that silly, that made up example. I can't charge 2 grand. Right. So there's a lack of belief, a lack of confidence in the value that they truly are delivering. And I think it's because we've since industrial revolution times, we've been paid for time, not been paid for effort, not for results. We've been paid per hour, unless you're paid piecemeal or something like that. But um, the and everyone is on a salary by and large, except for commissions and stuff like that, salary. It's not paid for, you're paid for your effort, sort of thing. Keep doing it and you'll keep your job. As soon as your effort goes down, So it's really, really hardwired conditioning. So they go, yeah, that makes sense. Oh, but they wouldn't buy it. And so the only solution I found through that is just to try it once, just put it in. And it's not, you don't try it to sort of like, would you mind if you say that this is the value and this is the price. Really, it's a good, and they've got to be prepared to lose that client.
Mm.
And obviously it's best done with a new client rather than an existing one. They've got to be prepared to lose that. But once they start getting the wins on that, they like the idea, but it's still, I find it's not, it doesn't immediately go back up again, go right now I'm totally in it, because this conditioning is
It's a while you
years
think, doesn't
in
it?
the making.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it still needs reminders, it still needs practice. As curious as that sounds, it's like it's a skill. It's like it's something to practice,
Yeah.
being able to
Well,
charge something.
I think, I mean, the way I read it's a way of thinking,
Precisely so, yeah.
which is a skill, I guess,
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah.
in the broadest sense.
No, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you about, you know, the experience you've had. I mean, have you had, I mean, on the journey that you've been on, I
Mm.
mean, have you had any particular surprises as you've been sort of working along this journey that sort of things have popped up and think, oh God, I didn't think it would work that way. I mean, have you had surprises, stuff like that, good and bad?
Instinctively, I know the answer is yes. I'm trying to think of specific examples. This is like somebody saying, "Go on, Chris, tell us a joke," and you go, and they say, "No, wait, tell us a joke about a horse." Oh, right, now I can find the
Yeah,
joke. It's like it's too broad a question. Um, the I don't think I can answer it in terms of surprise, right? Off the bat, because it's almost like my DNA, my MO is spotting patterns.
yeah.
So trying to find the question, what's the surprise? I default in my head to say, what's the pattern? Like I just said, it's like if we use value pricing as one of the types of multipliers, that the pattern is that you go through this. I think something's coming to me about trying to remember which
I mean,
business it
perhaps
was.
a different way to think about
Yeah,
it. Have there been any kind of critical moments when you've perhaps come up against a fork in the road and thought, oh, do I go that way or do I go that way?
that's you're talking about the horse now, which is because that's much clearer for me. Um, the the how I used to describe the whole journey that people can go on is it just it is ultimately had one way to build the financial moat is to build the business to a size and a risk profile that is worth selling to give you in a lump sum your financial moat, right? So it's all about in that route. It's like okay, what we're doing now is we're building the business to sell it.
Hmm.
And what I know to be true, but I found it difficult to articulate, is it's worth approaching the business like that, even if you're not planning on selling.
Yeah.
even if you're not.
Although most entrepreneurs will want to sell at some point, won't they? Because they get old like me and they think I've had enough.
It's yeah. Well, I've had a for years. I've used the phrase, that one day you will leave this business, even if it's in a
Yeah,
box.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But the conscious awareness and the intention to sell can be always kicked down the road. So
Mm,
so for a long time, it's not on the table, and so but as I said, it's always worth thinking about and designing the business to have with that in mind, to have it, because one of the things that makes businesses more valuable is that they work better. In other words, when the buyer comes in, they're taking less of a punt. It's more certain that they'll get their return, right? So a lower risk, more certain, more predictable, less stress business is more valuable. But that's also what we want even when we've got it, right? It's like
yeah,
how many people do a huge decoration job on the house before selling it, right? And they go, I wish we'd lived in this when it was like this,
yeah, yeah.
it's nice. The same thing with the business. I wish we'd, so that it's sensible to have the business working really, really well anyway. But it wasn't because it's not solving an immediate problem. People were not really going, okay, I'm going to do that because I'm interested in the idea of running it better. So what I found was that the people who have a sale intent would totally get it, right? Because their motivation is we're already talking about what they already want. So we'd be designing the business and engineering it so that it becomes much lower stress, much more predictable in every way. And then we get to the point where it is now on the verge of, or it's achieved a level where you think actually that this is worth at least, if not more than the financial moat target. That's where the surprise happens, or it used to surprise, because at that point I don't want to sell it anymore. I still will at some point, but not now.
Yeah.
And so the way I visualize this is you've been designing something, but there's a fork in the road, and the fork in the road, which is why you use that phrase, which is why it reminded me. Let's say the right hand fork is I'm going to go and sell it, but the left hand fork is I'm not. I'm going to, and it's not. It's a fork that is a crescent. It comes back and reconnects. Sell at some point, but right now I'm not. I don't want to sell because it's working. It's easy. I'm comfortable. I'm enjoying it. I've fallen in love with it again. And it's got all the things that I don't want to give up.
Mm.
It's not imposing on my family life or personal life. It's sweet. So it's surprising how often an apparent desire to get rid
Mm.
uh, deviates
I
and
mean,
says,
it kind of takes the pain away, I think. I mean, my experience is that, when I wanted to exit, I wanted to exit because I'd had enough,
precisely.
because it was such a lot of aggro. Whereas if it's
Yeah,
not being aggro, you can get back to what you enjoy doing
yeah,
and
exactly, exactly.
it doesn't feel quite so onerous.
And when you did, was that when you did exit, was that after a period of preparation time, like
Yeah.
a period of doing the redecorating, making it
Well,
polished?
the first time I sold, I didn't really, I just wanted out.
Right.
I think that subsequently, I put a lot more time and energy
That's
to
called learning, right?
right. Yeah. So I'm trying to stop being quite as stupid as I was. Yeah. And I think lots of people kind of go through that, but it is. I mean, one of the things I like about working with entrepreneurs is they are generally quite quick learners,
Yeah.
and they're very good at identifying when they've screwed things up or when they've done things and it hasn't worked, and they try and do it better next time. Because if you
Yeah.
don't have business, don't you? You've got to
Yeah. Yeah.
have
The
that kind of
the
mind.
it's again fascinating. I love these conversations because I agree with everything you said there. And I think there was a gap. So everything I agree with it, like they're often entrepreneurs, quick learners, often intelligent people, etc. But the gap was when you said quick learners, they can be bloody stubborn. And not
Yeah.
necessarily deliberately, like characteristically stubborn, just wired up to hardwired with certain beliefs that make the change difficult, and it manifests as stubbornness, right? So that could be the example we were talking about earlier about value pricing, for example. That can be really resisted and really hard to, they can do it and it works, but they still revert. But the same as they can think about the way they describe their offer. But this is what we do. This is how we do it, and it's hardwired in. So a lot of this work and opportunity for people requires letting go of some beliefs and some assumptions that are not super helpful,
Mm.
even though
Which
they
is
have
difficult.
served you. You know,
Which
that's
is,
the thing. It wasn't wrong. It's just not helpful for the future.
yeah, which is a very difficult thing for anyone, I think. I mean, I always say that one of the things I learned from mountaineering, if you want to get the next handhold, you've got to let go of this one.
Nice,
You know, same sort of thing, but it's
nice.
sometimes pretty scary to let go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know, because there's an element of risk, isn't there?
yeah, yeah.
Inevitably, the handhold might not be quite as good as you thought it was, and this one's a really good one. Or
No, but it's a very I've never used that thought about that metaphor, but it immediately comes to mind um, the relationship with risk there, because it could be an easy to reach one, but you still got to let go. It could be a difficult to reach one, but you could have a rope. You could have cash resources. You've got a rope. You've got your mitigation. So if it doesn't, you don't go all the way to the ground. You just go a bit further back. So that, yeah, it's quite a useful analogy. That.
yeah, but I think the point I'm getting at is that it's a mindset thing. You've got to be
Yeah,
willing to do that, and that is difficult. I think. I mean, I get the impression. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and they're hardwired to kind of beaver away at things. They're very determined. I mean, you use the word stubborn. I see entrepreneurs as very determined. They're very focused. I'm going to get there, and they're beavering away to get there. And somebody comes along and says, "There's maybe a better way of doing that," and they're not always able to make that jump
yeah,
straight.
exactly
Yeah,
so.
because they're hardwired to keep beavering away their
It
bit.
is. It's hard wiring, and
Yeah,
and there's no value, there's no purpose, there's no use in trying to force change or to tell someone they're wrong, for
mm,
example,
mm,
because they're not wrong. They're right for what they're doing. It just has consequences,
yeah,
and it's much more about, I suppose, to use your analogy there. It's like, well, that handhold's there. It's there. It's nothing to do with you. That handhold is there. It's just up to you whether you get it. No, but I'm scared. Would you like me to guide you there?
yeah,
I'm not telling you to change. I'm not telling you anything in that sense. It's everything's your choice. But I've done this a few times.
yeah,
I can stop you falling.
yeah,
You know,
yeah. That's right. Yeah, and people really value that. I think.
that's
Uh,
the point.
you know, let me ask you about in terms of the journey, because I'm one of the things I'm really interested in is what people learn from being a CEO and building a business. What would you say are the big things that you've learned along the way? I mean, you've talked about the kind of mindset shift.
Yeah,
What would you say are the big things that you've learnt along the way? If you were to go back to square one, I'm talking about the moment you changed direction, if you like. Is there
yeah.
anything you do differently, knowing what you know now?
Well, in terms of, I'll come back to that one about doing differently. But in terms of stuff that um, I've learned through years of experience and then reflecting on that and what have I seen, what are the patterns and so on. And one of the observations that I've developed and have learned is um, how businesses um, very rarely get designed. Instead, they simply evolve,
Yeah, yeah,
and it's totally it's just of course they are. That's not controversial. That's just obvious when you say it out loud. But the evolution from day one startup to, in my world, operating middle steady, it's all right. It's functioning. It's just capped. Um, that what that looks like is can be very inefficient. It can be very clunky. It can be very awkward. Not because it was designed to be that way, but because it wasn't. It wasn't designed at all. It simply evolved to be like that. And so one of the things I've learned is that that is a feature. It's like a design. It's built in. I was going to say it's a design feature. That's sort of ironic, really, but it's a feature of evolution and growth. And therefore, one of the things that needs to happen to move forward in whatever way, whether that's scaling or becoming multipliable or whatever other journey you want to take, there's a need for design, and that's quite a new concept for many people, certainly in the way that I mean it. So that's that because design brick has change baked into it, but it's not. There's not the instruction, if you like, is not you must change. The instruction is if the instruction is not necessarily the right word, but it needs a different design. It needs a tweak to the design, and then it opens up something. So that's one of the things I've learned. And also I think with the same people, they reach a point like, and this was my journey as well, where for a certain amount of time, a big part of the business has been about what does it say about me? So that's like we said, your identity is wrapped up in it. And it's about how can I make more money from this? So there's a sort of financial and an identity or ego type that those are enveloped and wrapped in the
Nice
business.
together, aren't they?
They are,
Yeah.
and they come together. They're not together themselves. They're different things, but they are both inherent. Um, and at some point in anyone's journey, in my experience, but certainly in mine, you get to the point where you go, actually, other things matter more now.
Mm.
Like what I'm doing with my life, what I'm doing with my time, what I'm doing with the people I love. And it's because it's one of the six sort of fundamental human needs. There's consistency and variety. If everything was the same every day, for years and years and years, and for many people, sadly, it is. um, it gets very, very boring. So you want novelty, but if everything was different every day, it would be massively stressful kind of lifestyle. But if it's the same for too long, it's like, really, I need to do something. I want to do, like you said earlier, like I was done. I just needed to get out. I wanted to walk away for whatever reason. And it doesn't have to be a crisis. It's just like I'm done. I've done my time now. This
Yeah.
is no longer fun, enjoyable, stimulating, motivating. This is just another day. I don't want to live like that. And that's one of I think the big lessons that I've learned is that, in my younger days, I wasn't there as I got to a certain stage of life. I don't think it's an age. I think it's a stage of life. You can actually know there's I need to make this work because there's something else more important.
Mm. Mm. To come back to looking back on the journey, I mean, what would you say is the biggest mistake you've made when you look back, and what did you learn from it?
Um, the when you and I spoke a few weeks ago, and you mentioned it earlier in this conversation, uh, you said you knew me at that time or you were
Yeah.
aware of me at that
It was
time
quite a
where
long
I was
time ago.
building a
We
franchise.
met
Sorry.
we met quite a long time ago.
Yeah, we did. And where I and my business partner at the time, we were trying to turn what we had into a franchise or a license type of organization. And the and it didn't work out. And so that's the thing that didn't work. So what was the mistake? Um, and the mistake we made was we had very high values. So we all know there are plenty of franchise opportunities around for people to buy into, and there are good ones and there are rubbish ones. um, and one in the kind of work that we do, we wanted to be really up there, one of the absolute best, and that meant we would have a very high bar
Mm.
for who the franchisees could be. There was criticism of others that were massively growing, financially massively successful, but from a brand point of view, very questionable. And it seemed like they'll take anybody who has money. This was we had like a very sort of, I don't know what the word, not evangelical, but very sort of righteous view. Right, we're not going to do that. This is because it's not just about money. It's about creating something that is really a brand that really stands for high quality. So we got really good people, and in the sense that we got good, they were good people in the sense that they were very good at the delivery. They were very good they had the skills, they had the experience that made client results very good. But at that time, what they weren't very good at themselves was creating clients in the first place. And what we hadn't developed and weren't very good at the time, so this was a mistake we made. We kind of relied on them being competent and good enough at feeding themselves. And we weren't able to fill that gap, and they weren't able to, but we didn't respond quickly enough to fill that gap. So that was a mistake, I think, that we just didn't have the right, whether it's the framework, the skill set, perhaps the experience at the time. I'm not sure. So I think that's.
Mm.
But we came out of that by saying, well, we'll pivot because that's not working. We're not going to keep flogging that horse and you know,
Yeah, I know enough. I've been there, and I tried to franchise a sales coaching business, and it's
yeah,
very quite difficult. I mean, somebody could do it, not me. I couldn't figure out a way forward in that situation, so I totally
yeah.
get.
It's a
And,
different business, right? Yeah.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah, no, that's right. And different. I mean, the thing I think people don't understand is that every business is different. Yeah, they've
Yeah,
got.
funny, I was writing about this only this morning, and that fundamentally every business is the same. No, let me turn that around. Fundamentally, every business is unique, but underneath it, every business at some level down is the same.
Well, if
The
you take accounting, I mean, accounting's always done the same way, isn't it? So that's the
For
same
example,
across businesses. But
yeah,
what I mean is that every business is different in the sense it's got different resources, different people focused on different markets, etc., etc.
of course it is. Yes, everyone's unique. Yes,
And
yeah,
that's
and the different people is important too because the fact that that we can have two people who run the same apparent business in the same market with very similar offers, but the characters, the beliefs, the
yeah.
attitudes, the aspirations of those two people hugely influences the direction and the scale of both those businesses. So
And
yeah,
in the sense that business is about people, they're different because people are different, aren't they?
yes, yeah,
Let me ask you about that. One of the things that has always struck me whenever we've spoken over the years, one of the things that's always struck me is that you bring with you a lot of enthusiasm, and you always, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but you always appear to really enjoy what you're doing. I mean,
I do. I
what would
love it.
you say is the thing that you've enjoyed most about building the business? I mean, you went through a difficult pivot on a couple of occasions.
Well, different personal. Oh, it didn't feel like a difficult pivot. It felt like a realization and a natural evolution. But the difficulty was coming through the personal
Yeah,
loss. Um, but the I, I've always been um, really clear. There's a sort of family joke. If you cut me through the middle, it'll say teacher, right? And
right,
that comes from absolute childhood. Like when I was 8, I knew I was going to do when I grew up. I was going to be a maths teacher.
right.
I just found it really easy, really natural, and I could explain things to my friends. The parents noticed, and they said, "Oh, you'd be a good teacher one day," and you pick up on this, and you
Yeah,
think, "Oh,
yeah,
right." And uh, I explored that route to becoming a teacher, but it was when I was going at that stage, there was just lots of negativity about it, and I thought that's not how doesn't appeal. I like the teaching, but flipping heck, all of
yeah.
the other stuff around it was tricky. So then I went through down the accountancy route. It was, became a chartered accountant, and as part of that, after I qualified, I did a year it was an international firm, and I did a year in the firm's training centre, and it really felt like I'd come home. I was now teaching. I was running training sessions and so on, but I was training not people who wanted to be there. I wasn't trying to sort of manage behaviour and whatnot, and also I was really interested. The accountancy qualification gave me a really good understanding and perspective of how businesses work,
Yeah.
not just from a financial point of view, but from the whole commercial point of view. But also, it instilled in me this sort of fascination of I think it's such a fantastic thing that we can have when we create businesses because it's so creative
Yeah.
and so it's such a statement. We can do so much help. We can help some. We can really do. I can say do good. It sounds really trite, but we can really make a difference, a positive difference to people. So that's why that's how I ended up sort of navigating a path into what I do now. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and I absolutely agree with you about business. I mean, I think business it's tremendous because it's about the exchange of value.
it is exactly that.
And that
Yeah,
involves creativity. So it seems to me it's all good. I know there are problems with business. I mean, sometimes businesses exploit people and stuff, but on the whole,
yeah, and but the other thing that I say I've learned it was sort of obvious to me, but to really acknowledge that actually running a business, not just building a business, but actually operating a business itself is a separate skill.
yeah,
You can be really good at your service, your skill, your client delivery thing, whatever whether that's social media or IT or whatever your specialism is,
yeah,
you can be really, really good at that. But actually, the act and the art of building a business and operating and having a business so that it doesn't sap you, so that it's really structured, it's calm. That's a skill. And it means that you can learn it because every skill can be learned. But the other part of it is you're not born knowing it. It's
Yeah.
not something that
No,
that you can just do. Some people we all have different talents, and some people have a natural talent towards it. But if you haven't got that and you've never learned it, it's no wonder it's hard. But we can learn it. There are routes.
which is a really positive message, I think.
Mm.
I think business is one of the most positive things. A couple of last questions just
Yeah.
before we wind up. So, I always like to ask is if you were to give one piece of advice to a rookie CEO, somebody starting out, perhaps on a journey like yours, I mean, what would your one piece of advice be?
Um, at the most sort of prosaic, I would say be very clear what you really want. Build this around you, around your life. Because if you don't, you'll be pulled and sucked away, and you'll have no bumpers, no barriers to remind you of where you wanted to be. And you'll end up somewhere that you resent.
Mm.
So make sure you're very clear on why you're doing it, or at least what you want it for. If you're not very clear on a big why, don't worry about that to start with. Why? Because I need to pay the bills. That's fine. That'll do as a why. But be very clear about your own boundaries, about what you're prepared to do, and what you're not prepared to do. Because I just know this as a truth that if this way didn't work, it's not the only way.
Yeah.
So if you think, oh, I can't say no to that client because, and you end up somewhere that's hell. So don't have your boundaries, because if you think, I don't know how to do that, I don't know how to get another client from that, or I don't know, there's always an answer.
That's
There
right.
is an answer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I always say that to kids, I mean, I don't have a lot of dealings with kids, but when young people are thinking about what kind of career, I always say to people, don't think about what kind of career you want, think about what kind of life you want, and then worry about a career afterwards. Because there's lots of different careers that can help you get to the places and do the things that you want to do.
So
But you've got to know what you want to do first.
when my two kids were sort of early teens, I said to them both together, I said, some curious advice from dad here. And I said, um, I don't want you to go to university, and I don't want you to get a job. And I don't mean either of those two things. What I mean is, I don't want you to go to university because that's what you're supposed to do, or because that's what everyone else is doing. I want you to choose to go to university because there's a good reason for it. And if you choose not to, you will have a good reason for that. And I'll absolutely support that. And I have two children who did the opposite. And when I say I don't want you to get a job, I don't really mean that either. What I mean is, I don't want you to have a job to earn money for the rest of your life, because that's totally giving away your life to
That's
a
what-
salary,
yeah,
to an
yeah,
employer. I want you to figure out what you want to do, and if you want to find your own way and be sort of entrepreneurial in whatever that means, that's cool. If you want to be employed, that's also cool. And so my daughter, for example, she's in um, clinical neuropsychology, so
Wow.
she's in the NHS. So that's a job, right? But it's not. It's more than a job. That's a mission. It's her
Yeah.
purpose, and so on. So all that's a good reason that she's not doing that to earn money for the rest of her life. She's doing that because it's where she wants to go. For example,
Yeah.
my son is doing a completely different path and on his own terms. So it's all
Yeah.
that's what I want. That for me, that as a dad, that makes me really proud, because
Yeah.
it was also very interesting when my son said he didn't want to do A levels. He was sort of done with school after GCSEs, and I had all of these principles and values, and I thought, honestly, inside, I thought, gosh, what are people going to think?
Yeah.
His sister's smart. She'll do A levels. Has gone on.
Yeah.
What are they going to think? And I'd caught myself in
Yeah.
this is the trance that we fall in. And it was, no, it's not, it doesn't matter at all what other people think. And I'm totally supported his decision, and it's been fantastic. He's having a great life. So, yeah.
It's funny that, isn't it? I mean, I'm a great believer that I mean, just because things don't go to plan doesn't mean that the outcomes can't be good. I mean, I often think
Yeah.
obsessed, I've got this plan, I'm going to do this. Well, that's fine. But if it doesn't play out that way, it doesn't mean it's going to be bad. You know, I mean, what was it John Lennon said? Life is what happens when you're planning to do something else or something, wasn't it? One
Yeah.
last question. One last question.
Yeah.
What are you excited? I mean, we were talking last time we spoke about, you've developed some really clever software to help people sort of
Hmm.
work out their moat and all the other stuff. What is it? And that looked pretty cool, actually. What is it that excites you about the next bit of what you're doing with your business? I mean, the stuff that's on the horizon for you.
The I think the it was earlier this year. I was um, there's a friend of mine who is kind of right up there with on the AI, the use of AI and leading edge. He's been a
Mm.
coder all his life, very tech, and he's super excited about about all of that. And he's built a community and around that, of which I'm part of. And um, I was reading all the time about people who are building these amazing things and using AI. And at that stage, I was really using AI for as a conversation buddy. It was a thinking tool, and I still heavily use it in that way. It's really, really helpful. But I'd never built something in like an app or something like that. And at one point, it was a Saturday, actually, a Saturday afternoon. I thought, I'm just going to play for a bit and see. And within, I don't know what it was, 2 or 3 hours, no, not more than three. And I'm not a coder, I'm none of that stuff. And in fact, I didn't even do it with typing because I was using voice to text. I had the thing you probably saw. So I built an app that was deployed. You could get it online. You can get it online, and uh, and that was the first tool. And since then, I've started to build more tools. And I think I find this really, intellectually, I find this really um, stimulating. I think it's really exciting because, like I said, it cut me through. It would say teacher. So a lot of my work with clients over all the years has been about explaining things in ways that they can understand and so they can assimilate it and then they can do. So there's like consume and then
Yeah.
use. And this, by using tools and things like that, we can shortcut that. So we haven't got to go through a lot of consumption and assimilation and then trying it. We can go straight into trying it because the tool helps you do it. And that, I think, is where there's a huge opportunity, I think, of for really making a difference to people. And I I'm really encouraged by my first experiences, um, uh, in the sense that I think probably anybody can do this. The
Yeah.
thing is, I think you have to know what you're trying to build.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not designing, you're evolving, right? So, and you'll end up, that joke about a camel is a horse designed by a committee. You'll end up with a sort of a horrible
Yeah. Yeah.
beast.
Yeah.
But if you know what you're trying to build, I think the tools are there for us to be able to use and guide. And if we don't know how to do something, we say, "I don't know how to do it," and it'll tell you what to do. So I think this is the opportunity that we have to really speed up implementation. And because of that, this is why I think we can build. And my whole method about becoming multipliable. This is how I think you can get solo person businesses of way more than seven figures, comfortably seven-figure businesses with one person if they choose to. I'm not, it's not right for everybody, but these are the sort of possibilities that exist. And if you already have an agency or a business with a team of people, you can build that if you want to. You can get your financial moat much, much quicker. You can choose to have a bigger financial moat if you want to, because the scope is there to do it without incurring a lot more hiring cost and financial risk and so on. So I just think the opportunity that it feels to me like we're really at the foothills of almost a whole new world. It's to mix my metaphors. It's there's so much new opportunity, and it's changing so fast. I'm reading so much about it. It's easy to think, oh gosh, we're falling behind because there's so much happening, and we're still barely started. I'm sure. So
Yeah, whichever way it shakes down, I think it's going to be exciting through an exciting few years.
yeah, yeah,
My
yeah.
take on it. Chris, thanks for taking a bit of time to come and have a chat. Always appreciate that. I mean,
Pleasure, Paul. Thank you.
really enjoyed hearing your story and the things that you've been up to. I mean, it's impressive and good luck going forward. I mean, like
Thank
you
you.
said, there's huge amounts of opportunities sort of popping up all the time, aren't there? So it's going to be a great few years, I think.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I agree. Thanks.
Cheers, Chris. Bye bye.
Cheers. All the best.